Commander Zektar stood tall on the bridge of the massive warship Crimson Talon. His dark green scales caught the red light from the control panels. Around him, dozens of Velkorian officers worked at their stations. The bridge hummed with quiet efficiency. Zektar was proud of his ship and his crew. The Crimson Talon was one of the most powerful vessels in the Velkorian Imperial fleet. Its weapons could destroy entire cities. Its shields could stop almost any attack. In his 20 years of service, Zektar had never lost a battle. Commander called his second officer, Sub-Commander Vexnal. The intelligence reports on the humans are ready for your review. Zektar walked to the main display screen. Data about humanity filled the holographic projection. He studied the numbers with growing amusement. These humans had only discovered faster-than-light travel 5 years ago. They had built small colonies in just 3 star systems. Their largest warship was barely half the size of a Velkorian cruiser. Pathetic, Zektar said with a low growl. Several officers nearby nodded in agreement. The Velkorians had conquered 47 star systems in the past century. They were known throughout the galaxy as unstoppable warriors. Their reptilian bodies were naturally tough. Their technology was advanced. Most importantly, they had no fear and no mercy in battle. Zektar remembered his first conquest 20 years ago. The butterfly-like Mothari had begged for peace talks. They offered tribute and promised to serve the Empire. Zektar had listened to their pleas, then ordered their homeworld burned anyway. Weakness deserved only destruction. Sir, another officer reported, we are receiving another transmission from the human vessel Liberty's Edge. Their commander, Jake Morrison, is requesting diplomatic contact again. Zektar's tongue flicked out in annoyance. How many times have they tried to contact us? This is the 7th attempt in 2 days, sir. Put it through. Let me hear what these weak creatures have to say. The main screen changed to show a human face. Commander Jake Morrison looked tired but determined. His skin was pale compared to Velkorian scales. His eyes were small and round. Zektar thought he looked fragile. Greetings, Morrison said in heavily accented Galactic Standard. I am Commander Jake Morrison of the Terran Defense Force. We know your fleet is approaching our space. We want to avoid conflict. Humanity offers trade agreements, technology sharing, and peaceful coexistence. We have resources that could benefit your empire without the need for war. Zektar looked around his bridge. Several officers were quietly laughing. The humans were offering to give away their resources rather than fight for them. This proved they were cowards. We have mapped your fleet movements, Morrison continued. We know you have superior numbers and firepower. We do not seek to challenge your military might. We only ask for the chance to prove that cooperation benefits everyone more than conquest. The transmission showed charts and data about human colonies. Morrison was literally showing the Velkorians their defensive positions and resource locations. Zektar could not believe such stupidity. Please respond, Morrison said. Our ambassador, Captain Lisa Hayes, is aboard the diplomatic vessel Harmony. She has full authority to negotiate any agreement that ensures peace between our peoples. The transmission ended. Zektar's bridge fell silent except for the quiet hum of machinery. Sir, Sub-Commander Vexnal said carefully, should we respond to their offer? Respond? Zektar's laugh was a harsh sound. These humans are giving us intelligence about their own defenses. They are begging us not to hurt them. They offer us their resources as tribute before we even demand it. Why would we negotiate when we can simply take everything they have? Zektar walked to the tactical display. It showed the human colonies spread across 3 systems. New Terra was their largest settlement with over 2 million humans. The other colonies were smaller, mostly mining operations and research stations. Analysis shows their defensive fleet has 37 vessels, reported the tactical officer. Most are converted cargo ships with basic weapons. They have no military shipyards and limited manufacturing capability. Zektar studied the numbers. The Velkorian attack fleet had over 200 warships. Each Velkorian vessel was more powerful than anything the humans possessed. This would not be a battle. It would be an extermination. Sir, the communications officer spoke up. The human vessel Harmony is requesting permission to approach under diplomatic flags. Let them come, Zektar decided. I want to see these humans up close before we destroy them. An hour later, the small human ship appeared on the main screen. It was white with blue markings. Completely unarmed, it moved slowly and broadcast peaceful intentions on all frequencies. Incoming transmission from Captain. Lisa Hayes, the communications officer. Reported. Put her through. The screen showed a human female. She had brown hair tied back neatly. Her uniform was clean and simple. She smiled as she spoke, which Zektar found disturbing. How could she smile when facing certain death? Thank you for allowing us to approach, Captain Hayes said. I bring greetings from Earth and all human colonies. We have prepared detailed proposals for trade agreements, cultural exchange programs, and mutual defense pacts. Our scientists have developed new medical techniques that could extend Valkorian lifespans. Our engineers have mining technologies that could increase resource extraction efficiency by 40%. She continued talking about cooperation and friendship. She offered gifts of human art and music. She promised that humanity would share all their knowledge freely if the Valkorians would agree to peace. Zektar had heard enough. These humans were so weak they would give away everything just to avoid fighting. They had no warrior spirit, no pride, no strength. Tell me, Captain Hayes, Zektar interrupted. What will you do when we refuse your offer? What will you do when we take your colonies by force? Hayes looked sad but not surprised. We will defend ourselves as best we can. We will try to evacuate civilians. We will fight if we must, but we will continue seeking peaceful solutions until the very end. Even when you are losing, especially when we are losing. Violence should always be the last choice. Zektar cut the transmission. He had heard enough weakness for one day. Set course for New Terra, he ordered. Maximum speed. We attack at dawn. As the Crimson Talon and the rest of the Valkorian fleet moved toward human space, Zektar felt confident this would be an easy victory. The humans were too weak to provide any real resistance. In a few days, 3 more star systems would belong to the Valkorian Empire. He had no idea he was about to make the worst mistake of his life. The Valkorian fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the New Terra system. Zektar watched the tactical display as dozens of human ships scrambled to form defensive positions. Their movements were fast but panicked, like small fish trying to escape a shark. Human fleet composition confirmed, reported the tactical officer. 31 vessels total. Admiral Ryan Clark commanding from the battleship Defiant. They are moving to intercept us but maintaining communication channels open. Zektar examined the human formation. They had positioned their largest ships in front with smaller vessels behind. It was a classic defensive strategy but useless against superior firepower. The human battleship Defiant was impressive for their technology, but it was still smaller than a Valkorian destroyer. Incoming. Transmission from Admiral Clark, the communications officer announced. Let me hear what their leader has to say, Zektar ordered. The screen showed a human male with gray hair and tired eyes. Admiral Ryan Clark wore a blue uniform with many ribbons. He looked like he had seen many battles, but Zektar doubted the humans had fought any real wars. I am Admiral Ryan Clark of the Terran Defense Force, the human said in a calm voice. Your fleet has entered human space without permission. We ask you to state your intentions and withdraw to neutral territory for negotiations. Zektar laughed. Admiral Clark, I am Commander Zektar of the Valkorian Imperial Fleet. We have come to claim these systems for our empire. You have 1 hour to evacuate your military vessels. After that, we will destroy anything that remains. Clark's face did not change expression. We cannot abandon the civilians on New Terra and the other colonies. If you insist on aggression, we will defend our people. But we still hope for a peaceful solution. There is no peaceful solution, Zektar replied. You are weak. We are strong. That is the only truth that matters. The transmission ended. Zektar watched as the human fleet began moving again. Instead of retreating, they were organizing evacuation routes for civilian ships. Captain Ben Martinez commanded a group of destroyers that escorted cargo vessels away from the planet. Even when facing certain defeat, the humans worried more about saving lives than winning battles. Begin the attack, Zektar ordered. Target their orbital stations first. Show them what happens when they refuse the inevitable. The Crimson Talon and 12 other heavy cruisers opened fire. Bright energy beams lanced across space toward the human space stations. The stations had defensive shields, but they crumpled like paper under Valkorian weapons. Explosions bloomed in the darkness as metal twisted and atmosphere vented into space. The human fleet responded immediately. Admiral Clark's ships charged forward, firing everything they had. Their weapons were primitive compared to Valkorian technology, but they showed surprising coordination. Captain Martinez led his destroyers in a flanking attack, while other ships provided covering fire. "Enemy weapons are having minimal effect on our shields," reported the defensive systems officer. "Hull damage negligible," Zektar nodded. As expected, human weapons could barely scratch Velkorian armor. But something about their attack patterns bothered him. The humans were not fighting like desperate defenders. They moved with purpose and discipline. "Sir," the tactical officer called out, "human ground forces are sending a transmission." The screen showed the inside of what looked like a military command center. A human female in a white coat stood next to communication equipment. Her name tag read Dr. Amy Foster. "Please," she said, and Zektar could hear explosions in the background. "We have over 2 million civilians on New Terra. Most are families with children. We are opening all civilian shelters and broadcasting evacuation routes. I beg you to allow non-combatants to leave safely." Zektar considered this. Velkorian military doctrine usually ignored civilians during conquest, but there was no tactical advantage to killing non-combatants before securing the planet. "Your civilians may evacuate," he decided, "but any ship carrying weapons will be destroyed." Dr. Foster looked relieved. "Thank you. We are transmitting safe passage codes now." As civilian ships began fleeing the planet, Zektar noticed something interesting about human military tactics. Lieutenant Colonel Steve Rogers was leading ground-based attacks using modified mining equipment. His forces used construction mechs as improvised tanks and industrial explosives as weapons. It was creative, if futile. The Velkorian fleet continued destroying orbital defenses. Human ships kept attacking despite taking heavy losses. The destroyer Courage exploded under concentrated fire, but its crew had evacuated most personnel to escape pods first. Even in defeat, humans prioritized saving lives over military objectives. "Prepare landing forces," Zektar ordered. "We will secure the planet's surface while the fleet finishes the remaining ships." Hundreds of Velkorian dropships launched toward New Terra. Colonel Alex Turner commanded the human ground forces, but they were vastly outnumbered and outgunned. Zektar expected them to surrender quickly once they realized resistance was hopeless. The landing was unopposed at first. Velkorian troops established secure zones and began advancing toward population centers. The humans had evacuated most civilians, leaving behind only military personnel and essential workers. Then something went wrong. It started with reports of human civilians hiding in what should have been empty buildings. Velkorian troops found families in basement shelters who claimed they had nowhere else to go. Captain Hayes had been wrong about the evacuation numbers. Thousands of humans remained on the planet. "What are your orders regarding non-combatants?" asked Ground Commander Thekmol. "Follow standard procedure," Zektar replied. "Anyone who does not resist will be processed for relocation. Anyone who fights will be eliminated." But the situation on the ground became complicated quickly. Human military personnel were mixing with civilians. Some people claimed to be doctors or teachers but carried communication equipment that could coordinate resistance. Others appeared to be ordinary workers but knew too much about Velkorian tactics. The breaking point came at a place called Riverside Elementary School. Commander Thekmol reported that his troops had surrounded a building containing 30 human children and their teacher. The woman, Miss Katie Brown, insisted the children were harmless civilians who should be protected under Galactic War conventions. But Thekmol's intelligence officer detected communication signals coming from the building. Someone inside was broadcasting tactical information to human resistance forces. When Velkorian troops demanded entry, the children and teacher refused to open the doors. "They are obviously using the children as shields while coordinating attacks against our forces," Thekmol reported. "Request permission to neutralize the threat." Zektar hesitated. Shooting children seemed wrong even for enemy civilians, but if they were being used to coordinate attacks against his troops, the situation fell under combat rules. "Are you certain they are coordinating resistance activities?" he asked. "Confirmed, sir. Signal analysis shows military-grade encryption originating from that location." Zektar made his decision. Neutralize the threat. What happened next would haunt him forever. Thekmol's troops stormed the building with overwhelming force. They found the communication equipment hidden in a supply closet. They also found 30 human children between 6 and 10 years old. Miss Katie Brown died trying to shield them with her own body. The communication equipment was just an emergency radio. The children had been trying to call their parents. When news of the massacre reached the human fleet, everything changed. Admiral Clark's voice came over all frequencies. It was no longer calm or diplomatic. It was cold as space itself. All Terran forces, he said. Protocol Omega is now in effect. Repeat. Protocol Omega is authorized. Zektar had never heard of Protocol Omega. Within minutes, he would wish he never had. The change in human behavior was immediate and terrifying. Zektar noticed it first in their communications. Before the school incident, human military chatter had been full of emotion. Soldiers asked about wounded comrades. Officers worried about civilian casualties. Pilots joked nervously during combat. Now their radio channels were silent except for brief, precise tactical updates. Target acquired. Firing. Route Alpha compromised. Switching to Bravo. Confirmed kill. Moving to next position. The humans spoke like machines, cold, efficient, without feeling. Sir? Subcommander Vexnell reported with concern in his voice. Human fleet movements have changed completely. They are no longer fighting defensively. Zektar studied the tactical display. Vexnell was right. Minutes ago, the human ships had been trying to protect evacuation routes and minimize their losses. Now they moved with deadly purpose, accepting casualties to achieve objectives he could not understand. Captain Tony Fisher's destroyer Retribution broke from the main formation and charged directly at 3 Velkorian cruisers. It should have been suicide. Instead, the human ship somehow slipped through their defensive fire and launched torpedoes at point-blank range. The explosion crippled 1 cruiser and damaged 2 others before the Retribution was destroyed. How did they penetrate our defensive screen? Zektar demanded. Unknown, sir. Their attack pattern made no tactical sense, but somehow it worked. More disturbing reports came from the planet's surface. Colonel Turner's ground forces had been retreating in disorder after the school massacre. Now they were attacking with coordinated precision that seemed impossible for such a demoralized force. Sergeant Danny Wright led a unit that somehow eliminated an entire Velkorian battalion. They used captured weapons and intimate knowledge of the terrain to set up ambushes that left no survivors. When reinforcements arrived, they found only empty positions and booby traps. Ground Commander Thekimol is requesting immediate air support, reported the communications officer. His forces are taking heavy casualties from organized human resistance. Zektar was confused. How could humans who had been losing badly suddenly become so effective? Their weapons had not improved. Their numbers had not increased. But their tactics had transformed completely. Sir, the intelligence officer interrupted. We are receiving a broadcast from the human fleet. It is being transmitted on all frequencies simultaneously. Put it through. The main screen showed a human female in military uniform. Her name tag read Major Kim Sullivan. She had blonde hair and blue eyes, but her expression was completely emotionless. Attention, Velkorian forces, she said in a voice like ice. You have committed an act of barbarism against innocent children. You have forfeited the right to mercy. From this moment, no quarter will be given. No surrender will be accepted. You will face the consequences of your actions. The transmission ended. What does no quarter mean? Vexnell asked. Zektar's throat went dry. In galactic military terminology, no quarter meant they would kill every Velkorian they found. No prisoners. No negotiations. No mercy. Sir, we are detecting major changes in human fleet composition, the tactical officer reported urgently. New ships are arriving from hyperspace. Zektar watched in growing alarm as dozens of human vessels dropped out of faster-than-light travel. These were not the converted cargo ships and modified civilian craft they had been fighting. These were purpose-built warships with advanced weapons and heavy armor. Fleet analysis shows these are reserve forces from the other human colonies. Intelligence reported. They must have been traveling at maximum speed since our fleet was first detected. But that was not the most disturbing part. The new ships did not communicate with the original human fleet. They simply took positions and began attacking with mechanical precision. No orders were given. No coordination was needed. They all seemed to know exactly what to do. Commodore Sam Davis commanded the reinforcement fleet from the heavy cruiser Determination. His ship immediately engaged the Velkorian dreadnought Thunder of Empire in single combat. The human vessel was smaller and had lighter weapons, but it fought with suicidal aggression that somehow worked. The Determination is ramming the Thunder of Empire, the tactical officer reported in disbelief. That is impossible. They would both be destroyed. No, sir. The human ship pulled away at the last second. They used the ramming threat to force the Thunder into range of their heavy weapons. The dreadnought has taken critical damage. Zektar could not understand what he was seeing. Human ships were using tactics that should have resulted in their own destruction, but somehow they were winning. They accepted terrible losses to achieve small advantages, then used those advantages to destroy much larger Valkorian forces. On the planet's surface, the situation was becoming a nightmare. Dr. Foster, despite being trapped in the ruins of the medical center, was somehow coordinating with orbiting vessels to turn the planet's industrial infrastructure into weapons manufacturing. How is this possible? Zektar asked. How can civilians produce military equipment so quickly? Analysis suggests they are converting civilian manufacturing to produce improvised weapons, intelligence reported. Mining equipment becomes artillery. Construction materials become explosives. Medical supplies become chemical weapons. But the humans were not just adapting their technology, they were adapting their entire approach to warfare. Lieutenant Carl Baker led civilian volunteers in attacks that caused psychological trauma among veteran Valkorian troops. The humans did not fight like soldiers. They fought like a force of nature. They attacked from directions that should have been impossible. They used weapons that should not have existed. They coordinated without apparent communication. Most disturbing of all, they showed no fear of death. Captain Nancy Green piloted her frigate Vengeance directly through a Valkorian formation, using the ship itself as a guided missile. Her crew escaped in pods while the ship's automated systems guided it into the enemy fleet. The explosion destroyed 4 Valkorian vessels. Sir, Vexnal said quietly, I think we made a mistake. Zektar looked at his second officer. Vexnal had served for 15 years and had never questioned an order. Now his eyes showed something Zektar had never seen before in a Valkorian warrior. Fear. What do you mean? These humans. They were not weak. They were holding back. Before Zektar could respond, alerts began flashing across every console on the bridge. Sir, the security officer shouted. Intruder alert on Deck 7. Unknown contact moving toward the main computer core. How did someone get aboard this ship? Unknown, sir. Security sensors show no breach of the hull, no unauthorized transports, but someone is definitely inside the ship. Zektar felt cold dread creeping up his spine. The Crimson Talon was the most secure vessel in the Valkorian fleet. Its shields and hull were intact. Its defense systems were active. How could a human infiltrator possibly be aboard? All security teams to Deck 7, he ordered. Find this intruder and eliminate them immediately. But deep down, Zektar knew it was already too late. Whatever the humans had become, they were no longer the weak species he had planned to conquer. They were something else entirely, something that should never have been awakened. The intruder on Deck 7 was not what Zektar expected. Security footage showed a single human female walking calmly through the corridors of the Crimson Talon. She wore a simple engineering uniform with the name tag Chief Engineer Julie Adams. She carried no visible weapons and made no attempt to hide from security cameras. How did she get aboard? Zektar demanded. Unknown, sir. Hull integrity shows no breaches. Transport logs show no unauthorized beaming. She appears to have simply materialized inside the ship. Zektar watched in fascination as Chief Engineer Adams bypassed 3 separate security checkpoints without triggering any alarms. She seemed to know the exact layout of Valkorian technology, despite her species having no previous contact with their systems. Security teams report they cannot locate the intruder, the security chief reported. She appears to be moving through maintenance shafts and service corridors that do not appear on our ship schematics. That is impossible. Those passages do not exist. Yes, sir. That is what makes this impossible. On the main battle display, the human fleet continued its relentless assault. Engineer Chief Pete Johnson had somehow reverse-engineered Valkorian shield technology and was broadcasting the technical specifications to every human ship. Within hours, crude but effective countermeasures were being deployed across the entire human fleet. Sir, the tactical officer reported with growing alarm, human weapons are now penetrating our defensive screens. Their effectiveness has increased by 300% in the last 2 hours. Zektar stared at the impossible data. The humans had somehow analyzed, understood, and countered technology that had taken the Valkorians decades to develop. They had done it in less time than it took to eat a meal. How fast do these humans learn? He whispered. The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Helen Price, who had been identified as the human fleet xenobiologist, hacked into the Velkorian communication network and broadcast a message directly to the Crimson Talon's bridge. "Commander Zektar," she said, her voice coming from his own speakers. "You asked how fast we learn. The answer is, as fast as necessary." Dr. Price's image appeared on the main screen without authorization from Velkorian systems. She looked tired but determined. Behind her, Zektar could see human technicians working frantically at captured Velkorian equipment. "Your technology is impressive," Dr. Price continued, "but it follows logical principles. Once we understand those principles, adaptation is simply a matter of engineering. We have had 5 hours to study your weapons, shields, and propulsion systems. That is more than enough." The transmission cut off, but the implications were terrifying. The humans had not just reverse-engineered Velkorian technology. They had improved it. On the planet's surface, the situation had become a complete disaster. Colonel Turner's forces were no longer fighting a defensive action. They were hunting Velkorian troops with systematic efficiency. Ground Commander Thekmol sent increasingly desperate reports. "Human forces are using tactics we have never seen. They coordinate without radio communication. They attack from positions that should be impossible to reach. They seem to know our movements before we make them." Sergeant Danny Wright had become something out of nightmares. His unit eliminated Velkorian patrols with such precision that other troops refused to leave their fortified positions. The few survivors who escaped his ambushes described attacks by humans who moved like ghosts and struck like lightning. "Sir," Vexnell said quietly, "perhaps we should consider withdrawal." Zektar looked at his second officer in shock. "Withdrawal? We have superior numbers and firepower. We cannot retreat from a species that was crawling out of caves a few hundred years ago." "With respect, sir, that is not what we are fighting." Before Zektar could respond, Chief Engineer Adams appeared on the bridge. She simply walked out of a maintenance panel that was too small for any creature larger than a rat. The security guards raised their weapons, but she held up her hands to show she was unarmed. "Commander Zektar," she said politely, "I need to speak with you." "You are under arrest for unauthorized boarding of a military vessel," Zektar declared. "No," Adams replied calmly. "I am not." She pulled a small device from her pocket and placed it on the main console. Immediately, every screen on the bridge began displaying the footage from Riverside Elementary School. The massacre of the children played on every monitor simultaneously. "This is what you serve," Adams said quietly. "This is what you are." The footage was not just being broadcast on the bridge. Zektar realized it was going to every personal communicator carried by every Velkorian soldier in the fleet. Every warrior was being forced to watch what had been done in their name. "How did you get that footage?" Zektar asked. "Your own security cameras recorded it." "I simply retrieved the data." Adams walked to the tactical display and began pointing at various ships in the Velkorian fleet. As she touched each icon, that vessel reported critical system failures. "Engines shutting down. Weapons offline. Life support failing. What are you doing to my fleet?" "I am showing you the truth," Adams replied. "Your empire conquers through fear and superior technology. But technology can be countered, and fear works both ways." On the display, Velkorian ships began breaking formation, not because they were damaged, but because their crews were deserting. The footage of the massacre had shattered the morale of warriors who had believed they were fighting for honor and glory. "You cannot defeat us," Zektar insisted. "We have conquered 47 star systems." "Yes," Adams agreed. "You have conquered species that were weaker than you, species that were afraid of you, species that had something to lose." She gestured toward the screen showing human ships. Captain Morrison's vessel Liberty's Edge had been destroyed hours ago, but its crew had somehow reached other ships and continued fighting. Captain Hayes's diplomatic vessel Harmony had been converted into a weapon platform and was engaging 3 Velkorian cruisers simultaneously. "We are not weaker than you," Adams continued. "We are not afraid of you. And after what you did to those children, we have nothing left to lose." Alarms began sounding throughout the ship. The main tactical display showed human ships moving into positions that formed a perfect sphere around the remaining Velkorian fleet. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and facing superior technology. They were also winning. "This is impossible," Zektar said. "No," Chief Engineer Adams replied sadly. "This is inevitable. You crossed a line that should never be crossed. You killed innocent children. Now you face the consequences. She walked back toward the maintenance panel she had emerged from. Wait, Zektar called. What happens now? Adams paused at the entrance to the impossibly small passage. Now you learn why peaceful species stay peaceful, she said. It is not because they are weak. It is because they know what they become when they stop. She disappeared into the maintenance shaft, leaving behind only the device that continued broadcasting the footage of murdered children. Zektar stared at the tactical display as human ships closed in from all directions. His mighty fleet was trapped by vessels that had been civilian transports just days ago. For the first time in his life, Zektar understood what it meant to be prey. The final battle did not last long. Admiral Clark's fleet did not simply defeat the Velkorian armada. They dismantled it with surgical precision. Each human ship seemed to know exactly where to strike for maximum effect while minimizing casualties. Zektar watched his proud fleet fall apart piece by piece. The dreadnought Thunder of Empire, flagship of the 3rd Battle Group, was disabled by concentrated fire from 6 human destroyers. Its weapons were destroyed, its engines crippled, but its life support remained intact. The crew would live to see their defeat. Sir, Subcommander Vexnall reported with a hollow voice. The cruiser Iron Fist is requesting permission to surrender. Denied, Zektar replied automatically. Velkorian warriors do not surrender. Sir, with respect, Iron Fist has 30% casualties and no functioning weapons. Continuing to fight serves no purpose. Zektar looked at his second officer. Vexnall had been his loyal subordinate for 8 years. Now the veteran warrior was questioning direct orders. The footage of the murdered children had broken something fundamental in Velkorian military discipline. Sir, the communications officer interrupted. We are receiving a transmission from the human vessel Defiant. Admiral Clark is requesting to speak with you directly. Put him through. Admiral Ryan Clark appeared on the main screen. He looked older than he had hours ago. His gray hair was messy and his uniform was stained, but his eyes held a terrible certainty. Commander Zektar, Clark said formally, your fleet is defeated. Your ground forces are surrounded. You have no possibility of victory or escape. I am offering you one chance to prevent further bloodshed. Velkorians do not surrender, Zektar replied. I am not asking for surrender, Clark corrected. I am offering you the chance to save the lives of your remaining troops. Unconditional ceasefire. Your weapons will be disabled and your ships will be escorted to prisoner facilities. Your crews will be treated according to galactic conventions. Zektar was confused. You said no quarter would be given. That was before your troops began deserting rather than continue following orders to kill civilians. We make a distinction between those who choose to commit atrocities and those who refuse to participate in them. The distinction was lost on Zektar, but he understood the tactical situation. Half his fleet was already disabled. Most of his ground forces had surrendered or fled into the wilderness. Continuing to fight would only result in the complete destruction of his command. What are your terms? He asked. No terms. No negotiations. You will power down your weapons and submit to boarding. Your war crimes will be investigated and prosecuted according to galactic law. That is all. The transmission ended. Zektar looked around his bridge at officers who had served the Velkorian Empire with pride and honor. Now they stared at him with hollow eyes, waiting for orders that no longer made sense. Sir, Vexnall said quietly. What are your orders? Zektar opened his mouth to order continued resistance, but the words would not come. Looking at the tactical display, he saw human ships surrounding each Velkorian vessel with overwhelming force. But they were not firing. They were waiting. Power down weapons, he said finally. Prepare for boarding. The next few hours passed in a blur of impossible events. Human boarding parties took control of Velkorian ships with an efficiency that seemed superhuman. They moved through the vessels like they had designed them personally. They disabled security systems that should have been impossible to hack. They neutralized resistance before it could form. Lieutenant Commander Brad Thompson led the team that boarded the Crimson Talon. Zektar expected brutal combat, but the humans fought with cold precision. They used non-lethal weapons when possible, medical scanners to identify wounded personnel, and capture nets instead of killing shots. Commander Zektar, Thompson said formally, you are under arrest for war crimes against civilian populations. I am a prisoner of war, Zektar corrected. No, sir. Prisoners of war are soldiers who follow the laws of combat. You ordered the massacre of children. That makes you a war criminal. Thompson's team escorted Zektar to a holding area that had been set up in his own cargo bay. Other Velkorian officers were already there, including Ground Commander Thekmol. The ground commander looked like he had aged 10 years in the past day. How did they defeat us so completely? Thekmol asked. Zektar had no answer. The humans had transformed from weak defenders into unstoppable attackers in a matter of hours. Their technology had improved beyond recognition. Their tactics had evolved faster than should have been possible. Dr. Helen Price entered the holding area carrying a medical scanner and a datapad. She began examining each prisoner for injuries while recording their identities. "Doctor," Zektar said, "may I ask you a question?" "Of course. How did your species become so powerful so quickly?" Dr. Price looked up from her scanner with tired eyes. "We did not become powerful, Commander. We have always been powerful. We simply chose not to use that power. I do not understand. Humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years. We have developed weapons that can destroy entire planets. We have created strategies that can defeat any enemy. We have built machines that can think faster than any biological mind." She paused to treat a cut on Thekmol's arm. "But we also learned that power without restraint leads to destruction, so we chose restraint. We chose diplomacy. We chose peace whenever possible." "Then why did you abandon restraint now?" Dr. Price's expression hardened. "Because you crossed a line that should never be crossed. You killed innocent children. When that happened, we stopped choosing restraint and started choosing justice." Through the cargo bay windows, Zektar could see human ships departing for Velkorian space, not as conquerors but as something far more frightening. They were going to ensure that what happened on New Terra would never happen again. Commander Sue Kelly entered the holding area, wearing the uniform of a human military police officer. She carried authorization documents and legal codes. "Attention, Velkorian personnel," she announced. "You are now under the jurisdiction of the Terran Defense Force. You will be transported to processing facilities where your individual cases will be reviewed. Those who participated in attacks against civilian targets will face trial for war crimes. Those who refused such orders or attempted to protect non-combatants will be processed as prisoners of war." "What will happen to our empire?" Vexnal asked. "Your empire's expansion is over," Kelly replied simply. "Humanity will guarantee peace in this galaxy whether other species want it or not. The age of conquest through superior firepower has ended." Zektar understood with growing horror what she meant. The humans were not planning to conquer the Velkorian Empire. They were planning to reform it. They would remove leaders who authorized atrocities. They would establish governments that protected civilians. They would monitor every military action to ensure compliance with galactic law. They were not interested in ruling other species. They were interested in making sure those species could never again commit the crimes that had awakened human wrath. Months later, Zektar sat in a comfortable but secure detention facility on a human world. Through his window he could see human ships coming and going from the spaceport. They carried diplomats, aid workers, and peacekeeping forces to dozens of star systems. The Velkorian Empire still existed, but it was no longer an empire of conquest. Human oversight had transformed it into a federation focused on peaceful development and mutual cooperation. Most Velkorians had adapted well to the change. They discovered that building was more satisfying than destroying. Zektar had been sentenced to life imprisonment for his role in the New Terra massacre. He spent his days writing reports about Velkorian military history for human researchers who were working to prevent future conflicts. He often thought about the moment when everything changed. The moment when humanity stopped choosing restraint and started choosing justice. The moment when the galaxy's newest species revealed what they truly were, when protecting the innocent. Commander Jake Morrison visited him sometimes. The human officer had survived the destruction of his ship and now worked in the diplomatic corps. He was helping to establish peaceful relations between humanity and the remaining independent species. "Do you ever regret what you did?" Morrison asked during one visit. Zektar considered the question carefully. "I regret that we killed those children. I regret that we awakened something that should have remained sleeping. But I cannot regret discovering the truth about humanity." "What truth is that?" "That peaceful species are not weak," Zektar replied. "They are the most dangerous of all. Because when they finally decide to fight, they fight not for conquest or glory, but for justice. And Justice Commander Morrison is a force that cannot be stopped. Morrison nodded sadly and left. Zektar returned to his writing, documenting the fall of an empire that had thought strength meant the willingness to hurt others. He had learned too late that true strength meant the willingness to protect others no matter the cost. The day he saw human wrath, his world had indeed fallen apart. But from its ruins a better galaxy was being born.